I think for like the first couple of months when you couldn't leave or you couldn't see friends, what I did was I turned to like entertainment. So I had phases. I had like a YouTube phase and like a Netflix phase. I had, yeah, I watched Euphoria and The Crown, like just a bunch of shows. And then actually this year, yeah, in the pandemic, I also turned to reading. Like I was a huge reader when I was younger. And then in high school and in like the first, my first few years of university, I didn't really read as much, like maybe once in a while. But then in the pandemic, like I really started reading a lot. Yeah, so that's also been really nice. And yeah, it's helped kind of make the pandemic go by faster.
Today, we have a Filipina of Ham-On, a communications professional in training of Ham-On, Marielle Lopez. Marielle is a communication major in her senior year at McMaster University here in Hamilton. She enjoys reading, writing, traveling, practicing yoga, and spending time with family and friends. So thank you for joining us. So we should start off with an icebreaker. So, what book are you currently reading? And tell us about it.
So the book I'm currently reading is called Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, and the book is essentially all about like human evolution and the future of our species. So it's kind of a heavy read, but it's really interesting, and there's a lot of content that I have never learned before in school that like I'm learning now while reading the book. So it's really, really interesting, and I've been enjoying reading it so far.
Amazing, thank you. All right. So why don't we begin by telling us your story with Hamilton?
Sure. So I first heard about Hamilton actually from when I decided to go to school here. So I moved here permanently for university back in 2017. And at first, well, I lived in residence, and then after I moved to on-campus housing. So that's my Hamilton experience.
Our next question is, what are the connections that you have to the broader Filipino or Filipina community in Hamilton?
I would say my biggest connections to the Filipino community in Hamilton would definitely have to be being a part of the Filipino McMaster Student Association. So I've been part of it since I was in second year, so back in 2018, 2019. And yeah, so I've been like active with their events and being a part of like the group. So I'm like acquainted with a lot of the members, and yeah, it's been really nice so far.
That's awesome.
Yes, yeah.
One question. What Filipino expression do you use or remember the most? When do you use it or think about it?
Not so much as an expression, but it's really like when you're like, you have a group of titas like with your mom, and they all are like making cuento in Tagalog, and then they all just like laugh at once. I think that to me like really stands out. And then you like when you're in another table with your cousins or your friends, and you look over and you're like, what are they talking about? So you like join because you want to know what they're talking about. And it never disappoints. It's always very interesting and very entertaining. So I think that's what I remember. And yeah.
That's so funny. I can definitely see that.
Yes, we love to live life.
Yeah. So aside from drawing, just that anecdotal experiences such as that, what tools and connections have you had or do you have to navigate between cultures, between being Filipina and Canadian?
For me, I would say one of my connections is that my entire family actually lives in the Philippines. So yeah, my parents actually moved back to the Philippines when I started university. So even though I grew up in Canada, I spend a lot of time in the Philippines. In Canada, it's just me and my brother. Like, I do have my friends and such, but I think it's different when you're with your family. So yeah, so I would say that I like to be like, I like to keep a very close connection to like my Filipino roots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was that for you then, like just being you and your brother?
During before quarantine, it was like pretty normal because we had our own thing. Like we had our own part-time jobs and such. But during quarantine, it was okay. Like we had our own rooms, so it wasn't too bad. Like we weren't always in each other's way. But I think like living with your brother is obviously different than living with like a friend or a roommate that you don't know so well, because you're like siblings and you've lived with each other your entire life. So there's a sense of like comfortability that you wouldn't have with like a friend. So yeah, it was like really cool though. Like I definitely yeah, like he's a cool roommate, and he also goes to Mac. So
Oh.
Did you guys ever argue? I have a younger brother. He's 3 years.
oh, you do?
So I'm just thinking of us
Okay.
living together. I'm like, oh, I wonder if there would be like, but
Fights, yeah. I think mostly about like, because I would say we're pretty good at like doing our own dishes, because we only have to take care of ourselves. So it's been, yeah, like we'll fight mostly about like cleanliness, but yeah, apart from that, it's been like pretty chill. So yeah.
not who like ate the last thing in the fridge that you wanted to save and the other one will eat it.
Actually, well, at first, and then after that, I was like, because he would eat my food because I like to buy in bulk, and then yeah, he would eat my food and then be like, no, you can't, like I bought this. So after a while, like I was just like, I put my foot down, and then he like, thankfully, he understands and like boundaries and stuff. Like even though we are siblings, we have our own little things. So yeah,
That's great.
mm-hmm.
So then why don't we talk about your experiences? I know you said you worked a part-time job and school. So like maybe in terms of like school as well, like what motivated you to start, or what are the challenges that you faced at school? And then what was like fulfilling? I know you're still in school right now, you're taking it online, but there's still some fulfilling things about being in school. And then other recommendations that you have for other students in your field.
From high school to university, it wasn't a huge shift for me. I was like really excited about going to college and like experiencing the uni life. So it wasn't super intimidating to me in first year. Like it was nerve-wracking, but I don't know, like the course load wasn't that much, I guess, or it was manageable because you take less classes, even though there's more work involved. So it's kind of like a trade-off in a way. But in terms of socially, I would say that like in first year, I definitely really like delved into the university experience and the living in residence. It was really easy to make friends during my first year, which I'm grateful for. And like I would say my closest friends are from my first year actually. So that's really, it's been a really cool experience. Even though I didn't meet, or I wasn't a part of the Filipino McMaster club in my first year, I'm still glad that like I met them in second year, because I think if I joined in first year, I definitely wouldn't have been as involved or have like wanted to put in that effort. So I think, yeah, like the timing really made sense for me.
For example, in the pandemic, for sure, like it's a scary experience for all of us, right? Like how did you initially approach that issue?
at the beginning, part of it was that I wasn't the only person going through the pandemic. A lot of people, I mean, everybody is going through that. So it was really easy to talk about it with, friends and family. I think for like the first couple of months when you couldn't leave or you couldn't see friends, what I did was I turned to like entertainment. So I had phases. I had like a YouTube phase and like a Netflix phase. I watched Euphoria and The Crown, like just a bunch of shows. And then actually this year, in the pandemic, I also turned to reading. Like I was a huge reader when I was younger. And then in high school and in like my first few years of university, I didn't really read as much, like maybe once in a while. But then in the pandemic, like I really started reading a lot. So that's also been really nice. And it's helped kind of make the pandemic go by faster. So
then what are your thoughts of Hamilton? What did you enjoy? Things like that, like, can you think of something that you enjoyed like the most, or like overall thoughts?
Overall thoughts about Hamilton. I think that Hamilton's definitely like an up and coming city. There's like a lot of charm to Hamilton, like things that you wouldn't find in like smaller towns, I guess. Like Locke Street, for example, or James Street is really cool, like with all the cafes and all the smaller stores. I think that's really cool.
What about your hopes for the Filipina Canadian community in Hamilton or in Canada? And second question to that is there a project you are involved or associated with that you want to give a shout out to?
So to answer the first part of the question, I would say that my hopes for the Filipina Canadian community, at least in Hamilton, would definitely be to have like meetings or events. I think that would be really, really nice and really cool. I think it's like really helpful to have a group of people that you can talk to, not just about like your experience being a Filipino, but also like beyond that. I think that would be really great, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are interested in being part of that.
What kind of events or meetings would you be interested to be involved in? Just out of curiosity.
I think so. For one, I think an interesting one would be like a Filipino book club, where you would meet, maybe not every week, but every other week, and you would discuss. You would read books about Filipino authors or Filipino-based books. So like this year, I read a couple of books. I read a couple of like books by Filipino authors, and it was really interesting. And it wasn't. I didn't read a lot of like Filipino Canadian experiences, but I read like Filipino American ones, and those were really cool and super eye-opening. And it makes like being Filipino, like growing up Filipino and moving in a different country, I guess, like in Canada, it makes it seem less daunting, because their experiences are really like, you can really relate to them, I guess. So definitely that would be a program that I would participate in for sure.
I love that idea.
Yeah,
I really do. I think that's an amazing, like, that's definitely something I think, even for myself, like Filipino or Filipina authors or even books based around culture is not something that like I, grew up with, or even like I was associated with through like school or even for myself. So that is definitely, I think, really a great, like, I'm all for the project. I'm like, let's do that. We should.
Thumbs up. Jess and I have been talking. This was actually our initial part of our initial discussions, Jess, right? Like reading about books written by Filipinas or Filipinos about anything actually, but written by Filipinos. Thank you for that, Marielle. Thank you.
Not a project, but I guess I'd love to give a shout out to the Filipino McMaster Student Association
Yoo-hoo!
because they're really cool. Yes. And yeah, they're an awesome group.
And then what motivated you to share your story with us?
What motivated me well, at first it was the post on PHMSA. It intrigued me for sure, and I think also like connecting with other Filipinas in Hamilton is really cool. And I do have like the Filipino community at McMaster, but I don't know too many people outside of the school, so it'd be really cool to meet like Filipinos and to know like Filipinos outside of McMaster. You know, I think like you guys asked like pretty good questions.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you
that
so much.
concludes our, informal interview, discussion, conversation. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for committing your time to speak with us. Like we really
For
value
sure.
that so much. So thank you.